Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 266. Tianyan Pavilion. Warm for you. At the foot of Jiao Mountain, there was a secluded path that was covered by layers of vines. Going up this path, one would reach the Kingdom Palace where members of the Nangong family would stay whenever they came over to pay their respect to their ancestors. The palace was not big, but once you turn a corridor, the scenery changes. In there was a garden planted with a type of dragon blood flower which emitted fluorescent light in the night. At this time, the flowering period had passed already, so only a few scattered clusters were still in full bloom. From afar, it looked like scattered stars, decorating the night sky. She may walk to the depths of the flower cluster, where there was a hot spring. He took off his robe, stepped on the shore with his white jade-like toes and looked down at himself in the pool. The hot spring water was very hot, but his eyes were very cold. He stretched out his hand and slowly stroked his chest. A large part of his chest had festered because of the backlash of the forbidden technique, but now he did not need to worry about it. Everything was going according to plan. Everything would be fine. He stepped into the spring water. The hot spring of Mount Jiao was imbued with the demonic dragon's breath. It was very comfortable to soak in. Shimei leaned against the side of the pool and closed his eyes. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound not far away. Shimei did not open his eyes and only lightly said, "Who is it?" Nangonglu came out of the bushes with a dragon blood flower in his hair. When he saw Shimei, he smiled happily. "Is close friend Ge bathing? Is there anything I can help with?" Shimei answered, "No." Nangonglu scratched his head. Then I won't be standing here. I'll go first. Otherwise, if you were naked while I wore clothes, you would be troubled." In the steam, Shimei smiled. His face became more and more transparent as it was moistened by the spring water. It was like the thin ice in the early winter of Jiangnan. It was crystal clear and fragile, yet cold to the bone. He opened his pair of peach blossom eyes and looked at Nangonglu with a smile. "Why would I be troubled?" Nangonglu was very straightforward. "Because you look good." "Oh. You're just a child. What do you know about beauty and ugliness?" Nangonglu said angrily, "I'm already 5 years old. I'm not a child anymore." Shimei's interest was piqued. His smile deepened. "Oh, my bad. Come then, let me ask you. Between me and the Taxian Jun, who looks better?" "Of course it's close friend Gage," Nangonglu said without hesitation. "Who is Taxian Jun?" "I don't know him." "Then let's put it in another way," Shimei said. "You remember Mo Ran, right? He said hello to you." Nangonglu pinched his fingers, thought seriously for a while and then nodded. "Who do you like better, me or him? Don't make a choice just because you are more familiar with me. I want to know what's beautiful or ugly in your eyes." This time, Nangonglu did not answer immediately. He tilted his head and thought for a while before saying, "I still prefer close friend Gage." Shimei seemed to be pleased. "Oh? Tell me, what's not good about him?" "I can't say." "Then why do you like me more?" Nangonglu looked a little wronged. "I don't know. If you think it's beautiful, then it's beautiful." Shimei was silent for a while. Suddenly, he walked out from the depths of the hot spring to a place where the mist was a little lighter. He crossed his hands and laid on the edge of the pool, revealing his soft and beautiful back. He smiled and said, "Come here." As he spoke, he waved his wet hand at Nangonglu. When Nangonglu came closer, Shimei stood up straight from the hot spring. "Ah!" Shimei laughed and said, "What are you shouting for? We're both men, what's there to be shy about?" Nangonglu used his hand to wipe his eyes and muttered, "I'm not shy. You got water in my eyes." Shimei did not care about his eyes. He pulled Nangonglu's wrist and forced him to look straight at him. Thus, the hideous scar on his chest completely appeared in front of Nangonglu's eyes. Look here. Are you scared? The scar was festering badly and pus was flowing out. Nangonglu only glanced at it and turned his head away in disgust. He was a child after all, so he said, "It's disgusting." Shi Mei's smile did not change, but his eyes were a little cold. "Now, do you still think I'm beautiful?" Nangonglu tried to break free from his grip, but Shi Mei's held him strongly. No matter how he tried, it was useless. In the end, his eyes began to tear up as he got a little scared. You let go of me. I don't like this. Look carefully. I don't want to. Ouch. There was a crisp cracking sound. Because he used too much force, Shi Mo actually dislocated Nangonglu's hand. His eyes flashed with anger and unwillingness. He was almost paranoid. Didn't you just say that I'm beautiful? How come with just a little wound, your beautiful turned to ugly? No. Is it that as long as a beauty has the slightest flaw, he will be hated? Shi Mei approached him. The past affection will become disgust and the past longing will become a thorn in the throat. Nangonglu finally could not help but cry loudly. I don't understand, I don't understand. Let go of me, I don't want to stay here. The noises he made turned Shi Mei's somewhat irritable mood at the beginning become even darker. There seemed to be black clouds rolling in his eyes. He suddenly raised his hand and slapped Nangonglu's cheek. He finally let go of Nangonglu and said coldly, "Trash, get lost." After Nangonglu cried and left, Shi Mei dived back into the depths of the hot spring. The surrounding scenery was still pleasant. The fragrance of the dragon blood flower was spilling out and the air was filled with a faint fragrance. However, his initial joy had disappeared. There was only anger in his heart, endless anger. He suddenly punched the surface of the water. The water splashed everywhere as he regained his calm. The ripples dispersed, once again reflecting the same gentle but festering chest. Shi Mei's anger suddenly gave birth to a sense of loss and powerlessness. He leaned back to the side of the pool again. He raised the curtain of his eyelashes and looked at the sky. People change. He murmured. Just like seeds can germinate, buds can become green, green leaves can bloom into flowers, flowers can wither and fallen flowers can be crushed into mud. Time can't be seen or touched, but everyone is quietly being worn down by it. Some people have their claws sharpened while some people have their edges and corners worn away. Everything will change. He tiredly cupped a handful of water and washed his face. Comparing his other life with his current life, he would know. But from what point did he start to walk down the wrong path, to the point where he could not turn back? After bathing and changing clothes, Shi Mei loosely tied up his ink-black hair into a bun and returned to the secret room on Mount Jiao through the fragrant path. He stood at the door for a while and then reached out to push the door. At this time, it was deep in the night. The candles in the secret room were almost extinguished, leaving only a single flame burning behind the curtain. Shi Mei entered the room quietly. He did not make any noise, but he brought with him the unique scent of soap after taking a bath. However, it was the scent that alarmed the man lying behind the bed curtain. Taxian Jun's slow and hoarse voice sounded, "Who is it?" Shi Mei gloomily said, "It's me." There was a moment of silence inside the bed curtain. Then, the sound of clothes rustling could be heard. Taxian Jun sneered. "Master is really elegant. You can't sleep in the middle of the night, so you came to my bedroom to eavesdrop? Aren't you ashamed?" Shi Mei's face became colder. "You should know when to stop. If you kill him, no one will be able to play." Taxian Jun's voice was lazy and low. "Master, you can rest assured that this venerable one don't have any perverted fetishes in bed. I've always been pragmatic. I'm not interested in idle chatter, stinging people with snakes or playing guessing games with blindfolded eyes. None of that interests me. Rest assured that nobody is getting killed. Idle chatter, stinging people with snakes or playing guessing games with blindfolded eyes, even if he tried to be open-minded, he would know exactly who he was talking about. Shi Mei's anger rose in his heart. He stepped forward and opened the curtain. It was as if a knife and a sword had touched each other. Sparks flew everywhere. Shi Ming's feminine face was facing Taxian Jun's handsome face. You. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly stopped. He had thought that Taxian Jun and Chu Wanning would be all over each other after being apart for such a long time. However, without the curtain blocking his view, the revealed scene really surprised him. He saw that Chu Wanning was sleeping soundly. His cheeks were hot and slightly red. He was having a fever. Taxian Jun's clothes were slightly open, revealing a large part of his smooth and well-proportioned chest. He was holding Chu Wanning in his arms. His face was calm, but his big hand was touching the hair of the person in his arms. He looked like he despised him but would never let him go. Shi Mei said. What are you doing? Taxian Jun looked at him with disdain. What do you think I'm doing? Forget it. Why bother with a dead person? Shi Mei closed his eyes and forced himself to suppress the anger in his heart. But the little flame in his chest was burning and couldn't be extinguished. Finally, he couldn't help but sneer back. I didn't expect that the Taxian Jun would need Shizun to accompany him to sleep at such an old age. I think if it's not because he's afraid of the dark, then he probably wants to be flirted with Shizun. It had to be said that Shi Mei's words were very effective. Taxian Jun immediately narrowed his eyes dangerously. He subconsciously wanted to raise his hand to push away Chu Wanning, who was sleeping in his arms, or simply kick him off the bed. This would probably look very imposing. But seeing Shi Mei come closer, the last thing he did was to hold the man in his arms tighter. He waved his wide sleeve and covered Chu Wanning's face. After doing this, Taxian Jun raised his eyes gloomily. What does this venerable one's business have to do with you? Shi Mei gritted his teeth and said, there should be a limit to talking back. Don't you realize who made you? Hanlin Divine Hands only has this one sentence to threaten this venerable one with, Taxian Jun said coldly. You're really quite promising. You. Shi Mei was continuously rebuffed by him. In the end, he couldn't bear it anymore. He raised his hand and poked Taxian Jun's forehead, transferring some spiritual power. Soul scatter. He chanted the incantation between his plump lips and teeth, but Taxian Jun still persisted for a long time. It was so long that Shi Mei's heart trembled. He even felt that this man was about to completely break free from his control. His forehead was dripping with sweat. He was in a stalemate with Taxian Jun. In the end, he used up almost all of his spiritual power and shouted, Soul scatter. This time, Taxian Jun's body shook slightly and then his eyes finally lost focus. Shi Mei retracted his spiritual power and gasped for breath. He covered his aching chest and felt dizzy. Because of his physique, his spiritual core and spiritual power were inferior. Even if he worked hard, he still couldn't be compared to others. His expertise in medical cultivation is very good, but once it involved something that required spiritual power, his body couldn't withstand it. Shi Mei closed his eyes for a while and then looked at Taxian Jun. I'll ask you again, what were you doing just now? Because he was being controlled, Taxian Jun answered emotionlessly, he had a fever and was feeling cold. So. This living dead who only had a wisp of his soul from the other life said lightly, with this venerable one holding him, he will be warmer. Shi Mei stared at Taxian Jun for a long time. Warmer. His pale lips moved, and suddenly he laughed, though it didn't reach his peach blossom eyes. Mo Ran, are you crazy? Touch your own body temperature, who do you think you are? Your whole body is as cold as ice. You are already dead, heartless, and no longer had any warmth. You are even cold yourself and you still want to warm him. Taxian Jun's empty black eyes seemed to flash with a trace of pain, but it was fleeting. After all, he was a corpse. Shi Mei said, get up. Taxian Jun didn't get up immediately. His black eyebrows were tightly knitted, as if he was struggling between his own will and Shimei's control. You, get up. The order was stronger, and under such a fierce tone, Taxian Jun finally obeyed. He slowly got up from the bed. His robe was still open and Chu Wanning's body temperature was still on his chest that was no longer beating. Shimei said gloomily, "Get out." Taxian Jun took a few slow steps before he suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, "There is." "What?" Taxian Jun stiffly repeated, "There is." Shimei didn't react for a moment and asked, "There is what?" "Warmth." The man slowly raised his hand and touched his chest, stroking the body temperature left by Chu Wanning. "Here, it is warm." Shimei felt as if he was pricked by a needle and suddenly became angry. There was nothing more annoying than the puppet in his hand being disobedient, so he shouted, "Get out of here." Taxian Jun took 2 more steps, but this time it was really only 2 steps, and his expression suddenly became bitter. "No." He clutched his head, and the meridians on his palms bulged. His entire body trembled, and a low gasp came from his throat. "This venerable one is unwilling. How can this be, this be?" His eyes were closed. His will was strong but weakened, his memory comes and go. He fought and struggled and had been suffering for so long. He had been tormented for 2 lifetimes. You. Impudent." The murmuring stopped, then the trembling stopped abruptly. Shimei let out a muffled groan and clutched his chest. When Taxian Jun broke free from his control, he was hit by a powerful burst of energy as backlash. He almost staggered back a step. Then, he saw Taxian Jun suddenly opened his eyes, a bloodthirsty and fiendish look appeared in his eyes. The pair of eagle-like black eyes were clear of confusion, reflecting Shimei's cold face. Shimei's face paled as he said slowly, "You are recovering faster and faster." Taxian Jun didn't say anything, but his eyes were shining. He slightly gasped and raised his hand to summon Bulet Ngui. Shimei slightly raised his chin and his eyes moved up to the handle of the sword and then fell on Moran's face, which had the expression of a beast of prey. "Why are you angry? Do you want to kill me?" The dark blade was raised and in the blink of an eye, it was put against Shimei's snow-white neck. The force was so strong that it even scratched the skin as thin lines of blood appeared. Shimei didn't retreat and instead sneered, "Your Majesty, you can only walk now because of my spiritual power. If you kill me, you will also die. There's no way you don't understand that." Shimei continued, "In terms of strength, I can't beat you. But you have to think carefully, do you want to die or do you want to continue living in this world?" Taxian Jun's hand was very steady, it didn't shake at all. But after a moment, he suddenly turned his hand back, withdrew Bulet Ngui and turned his head away. When Shimei saw that he withdrew the sword, he raised his hand and slowly touched the blood on his neck. Then he said, "Fortunately, you are not too stupid. In the future, cease all these talks about fighting and killing. Actually, you know the relationship between us very well." Shimei glanced at Taxian Jun, "You are like a rusty sword. I want to restore you to your previous state and continue to be my blade. And yet I'm afraid you plan to completely get rid of my control and then take my head after you recover." Taxian Jun's black eyes moved and looked at him coldly. "All these years, you have continued to work for me in the other world. The rift created by the gate of time and space, life and death was very small and it is difficult for people to pass through, so I usually send you letters through carrier pigeons. But occasionally, we would use soul-devouring worms through shared heart array to communicate with each other. You shouldn't be surprised that I knew what you're thinking." Taxian Jun finally spoke as he coldly said, "You are far from being blind, which eye of yours saw me being surprised." Shimei pursed his lips and his expression became even more heavy. Then he said, "Good. Since you know the positives and the negatives of this matter, then you should endure until then. Let's work together and wait for the day we succeed." Then, we'll see if you can kill me or if I'll obtain an invincible weapon. Taxi and June said, we will see. Shimei was about to say something more, when suddenly, Chu Wanning, who was on the bed, let out a soft groan. However, with this soft sound, the two men who were in the middle of a verbal battle immediately turned their heads towards him. Wanning. Shizun. The former martial brothers looked at each other. Taxi and June sneered but didn't say anything. After a while, his eyes moved from Shimei to the unconscious Chu Wanning. After a while, he said in a seemingly indifferent tone, this person has been feverish for many days but he doesn't seem to be getting better. If this goes on, will he? Taxi and June, who killed people like flies, couldn't seem to say that certain word. His long eyelashes moved and he closed his eyes. Shimei didn't care though. What do you want to ask? Do you want to ask if he will die? He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Taxi and Jun's originally very pale face became even paler. He pursed his lips, as if he hated the word die, and only said concisely, will he? Of course, he won't die. Don't underestimate the venerable Baidu immortal. But you still have the nerve to ask me this? Shimei raised his eyebrows. Didn't he have a fever because you were too rough? Taxi and Jun's facial expression became even worse as he gloomily said, he is not me, don't confuse me with that trash. Hearing him say this, Shimei stared at him up and down and finally said, what a coincidence, I also think he is a trash. You know very well that I tried so hard to rip a huge gate of time and space, life, and death to let you come to this world so you could make that trash disappear and take your position at the top of this human world. Your Majesty, he suddenly took a playful tone and addressed Taxi and June like this, just a little more, and our goal will be achieved. You actually want to have complete power, right? You want to have a powerful spiritual core, right? Shimei was like a snake hunting for its prey. He stuck out his scarlet tongue as he seduced and enticed. He saw the desire in Taxi and Jun's eyes. So, he smiled, determined to win and use a card up his sleeve. If you want to recover your full power, then be more obedient. His white teeth were dripping with poison and his eyes were shining. If you are obedient, then it will be easier for us to do things. Taxi and June was silent for a moment, then flicked his sleeve, let's not talk about this first. Then he pointed at Chu Wanning and said, let's talk about this. Him. His body was being taxed and overly stimulated due to his souls merging together. Shimei said lightly, there is nothing to talk about it. But if you really want to make him feel better, then you should leave first. Taxi and Jun's eyes immediately became alert. What do you intend to do? Shimei smiled faintly and said, I'm going to treat him. I want to be here, too. That won't do. Shimei said, when Hanlin Divine Hands perform his medical skills, no one is allowed to see it. Seeing that Taxi and June still had no intention of leaving, Shimei said, you don't want to leave. Fine. Then I will go out and you stay. Aren't you very capable? I'm sure you can definitely take care of him. Hearing Shimei's words, the Taxi and Jun's face became even worse. His spiritual power was fierce and overbearing, but the most unsuitable skill for him was healing. In his other life, there were so many people in the palace and there was no shortage of doctors, so he had never carefully studied medical cultivation. Shimei regained his composure and looked at him with a smile. Taxi and June was obviously disgusted by his smile and suddenly turned his head, gritted his teeth and didn't want to look at Shimei again. After a while, he said, all right. This venerable one will go out and you will heal him. He paused, and then said fiercely, but this venerable one will be at the door, if you dare. He didn't finish his words, but the coldness on his face was almost enough to kill people. If you dare to do anything to him, I will immediately take your worthless life. This kind of threat didn't have much effect on Shimei, so he smiled again. And made a please leave gesture to Taxi and June. Taxi and June went out, but before he left, he stayed at the door for a long time with a gloomy face. Shi Mei stood in the now quiet secret room and looked at the stone door that was finally closed. After a while, he turned around and walked to the side of the white-clothed man on the bed. The mocking smile on Shi Mei's face disappeared, and it was replaced by an extremely calm but crazed expression. He said softly, "Shizun." Step by step, he walked over. Now that Chu Wanning was finally lying in the palm of his hand, so what if Taxian Jun was standing outside? He had plenty of ways to prevent Chu Wanning from making a sound. If Taxian Jun came in, no matter how angry he was, there was nothing he could do. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame himself for being too naive and incompetent that he could only cup his hands and leave his lover in the snake cave with Han Lin. Shi Mei's slender white fingers opened the curtain and he gazed at the feverish man on the bed with a gentle and greedy gaze. "This time, no one will disturb us." He slowly sat down and raised his hand to touch Chu Wanning's cheek. "Come, Consort Chu, let me teach you a good lesson in this place where your husband was just a wall away." End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 267. Tianyan Pavilion. Golden Dragon Coiled Pillar. Shi Mei first fed Chu Wanning a healing elixir, then bent down. His soft and slender fingers were like 10 bewitching white snakes, diving into his ink-black hair. He lifted the back of Chu Wanning's head and pressed it against his forehead. Zhuangzhou's dream, the incarnation of the butterfly, always accompanying each other through the night. He softly chanted the spell, but as he chanted, he suddenly stopped. He originally wanted to cast a spell to remove some of Chu Wanning's memories. This was one of the spells he was best at and he had used it on Mo Ran before. However, it was probably because Chu Wanning's soul was very chaotic and his memories were in the recovery period that his mind was very resistant to outside influence. He found that this trick was not effective on Chu Wanning. "This is really troublesome." Shi Mei sighed. He closed his eyes, then opened them. A pair of peach blossom eyes lingered with a strange light. He stared at Chu Wanning with this pair of eyes, then chanted again, "Zhuangzhou's dream, the incarnation of the butterfly, always accompanying each other through the night. Yesterday was like flowing water, intoxicated in this mountain. There was some effect this time, but it was not perfect." His spell was like a huge stone thrown into a pool. Although it splashed up tens of thousands of waves, it would soon return to its original state. But it didn't matter. It was good enough to make him forget for a while. He didn't want to see Chu Wanning's mind filled with killing intent when he and Chu Wanning went to the Sea of Desire together. That would be too unappealing. "Shizun, you've slept for a long time. You should wake up now." This soft call was like a curse. After a while, Chu Wanning's eyelashes moved slightly and he slowly opened his eyes. Because of Shi Mei's spell, his consciousness was temporarily blurred, pausing in his previous life, stopping after Shi Mei's death. In the past, Chu Wanning was hurt too deeply by Mo Ran, who lost his supposed love. Subconsciously, he always thought that it would be good if the circumstances could be changed. Thus, his divine sense traced back to those years. However, a person's 3 souls and 6 spirits were intricate to begin with, and Chu Wanning's body was carrying the souls of 2 lifetimes. Therefore, even though Shi Mei had cast a spell on him, his mind was still in a mess. So, it seemed as if he was in a dream. Some of his memories were in disarray and he couldn't distinguish between dream and reality. "Shi Mingjing." "Yes." Shi Mei's voice was very gentle, suppressing some kind of twisted gentleness. "It's me." Chu Wanning seemed to be very tired. The high temperature made him feel uncomfortable all over. He just faintly responded and closed his eyes again. Shi Mei knew that he was adapting, so he wasn't in a hurry. He waited calmly beside him. After a while, he heard Chu Wanning sigh with his eyes closed. "I'm afraid I'm dreaming. It's great that you're still alive." He knew that his memories stopped after the heavenly rift in his other life, but he didn't expect him to have such feelings. Shi Mei's heart skipped a beat. He felt a sense of bitterness that he hadn't felt in a long time. You can't bear for me to die. You're still so young. There are so many people who like you. Chu Wanning said softly. It shouldn't be you. I'm sorry. It would be good if it was me. At least no one would be too sad. The bitterness in his heart became more and more obvious, stirring up his lifeless heart. He had this feeling when he first walked back with Chu Wanning under the same umbrella. Later, after so many years of conspiracies, the people around him were either died or scattered. He laid quietly in the dark, treating himself as a heartless stubborn rock. Later, he really thought that he turned into a rock. Until today, he hadn't truly felt the existence of a heart. The feeling was sour, sweet, bitter, and itchy. He clearly knew that he shouldn't have such emotions. The sour rain would corrode the boulder and the soft moss would make him fall apart. But he still couldn't help but grab Chu Wanning's hand. His heart was beating fast. He opened his mouth, but his throat was dry, so he swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked again, "What about you? If I die, will you be sad? Have you ever been sad?" Chu Wanning's phoenix-like eyes were half open. Under his long and thick eyelashes were a pair of eyes that carried too many thoughts. Shi Mei tried hard to look inside, trying to catch a trace of emotion. But there was none. Just like how water is water by itself, wheat is wheat by itself. A kind of emotion that is simply placed there can only be that kind of emotion. It was a pity that a person's emotions could never be singled out. The death of Shi Mei had made him sad, pained him and made him blamed himself. With so many emotions mixed together, it was like wheat mixed with water. It had long been fermented and changed. It was no longer the same as before. Shi Mei stubbornly asked, "Shizun, if you were given another chance, would you be willing to give up your life to save me like you were willing to save him?" Chu Wanning's eyes were blank. "Would you?" Shi Mingjing. He only had time to say these 3 words before his lips were suddenly violently blocked. He had waited so long for the answer, but when the moment came, he didn't dare to listen. He didn't want to hear. Shi Mei thought that he probably knew what his answer would be. The resentment in his chest was rampaging. He was kissing the man on the bed in retaliation, greedily sucking on him. At first, Chu Wanning didn't react at all. It was only when Shi Mei's tongue tried to pry open his mouth that he seemed to have wake up from a dream and opened his eyes wide. "Ugh. Shh, don't make a sound." Shi Mei took a breath and pointed at Chu Wanning's throat to silence him. "You taught us this spell before, saying that it would stop us from making a sound when it's dangerous to do so. Did you ever think that one day, I would use it for this purpose?" As he spoke, he didn't look at the confusion and resentment in Chu Wanning's eyes. His jealousy and desire almost made him lose himself. "Shizun, do you know? It's been 2 lifetimes. I've painstakingly worked hard, step by step, and I've never had a day of peace." He tied Chu Wanning's hands and feet to the bed. As he did this, he gritted his teeth and said, "I'm not a normal person. What I want to do doesn't allow me to be a normal person, but so what? If Taxian Jun, who is nothing but a puppet, can do whatever he wants, why should I be overcautious?" As Shi Mei said this, he watched Chu Wanning struggle furiously under him. He felt both pained and pleasured. "Now, I've thought it through. Whether one was proud or not, one has to enjoy life to the fullest. Shizun." He straightened up and hurriedly began to take off Chu Wanning's clothes. "It wasn't easy to get to this point, let me have a taste of you. Consider it a reward for your disciple." A seriously ill person didn't have much strength to resist, so Shi Mei easily took off his robes. The air was cool, the light was hazy, the lines were sharp. The muscles were tight on the man's body, which was covered in bruises and discolored marks left by Mo Ran. Mei's eyes darkened, whispering to himself, "He's really too rough." Saying this, he raised his hand and pinched Chu Wanning's chin, looking into those eyes. Those phoenix eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. Chu Wanning probably couldn't distinguish between dream and reality. He probably felt that everything in front of him was too absurd to be real, but also felt that the touch was too real to be fake. Adding on the confusion of the memories of the two lifetimes, it wasn't that easy for him to immediately react. "I'm not like him." Mei stared at Chu Wanning for a while, his eyes gradually softening, but there was a trace of strangeness in that gentleness. "He doesn't know how to make you addicted to this. Once you've tried me, you'll know that he's nothing." Saying this, he began to undress himself. He had just finished bathing and was only wearing a bathrobe. It slid down to the floor easily, revealing his delicate body that was as exquisite as a piece of jade on Mount Kun. "Shizun," he murmured, pressing his body on top of him. Whether this was a dream or reality, Chu Wanning was disgusted to the point that he couldn't stand it. His whole body was trembling and his face was ashen. "Your body is so hot." He knew that if he let go of the spell on Chu Wanning, this man would probably curse him and his murderous aura would be threatening. But Mei still couldn't help but touch and murmur, "Will it be hotter inside you?" Ming Cheng. Mei was startled when he heard this. "You broke free from the silencing spell." He raised his eyes and stared at Chu Wanning's face. You're really..." Chu Wanning's lips and teeth trembled, coughing up blood and said hoarsely, "You impudent. Get off me." Mei was silent, looking down at the man under him. Was this person too fierce? Too stubborn? Or was he too ignorant and unwilling to admit defeat? There were too many things he wanted to say but didn't know where to start. In the end, Mei simply smiled, and then when Chu Wanning was about to say another word, he suddenly covered his mouth, quickly took off the headband and tied it between his lips and teeth. "Since you can break free from silencing spell, then I can only tie you up." "I'm sorry, Shizun." Looking into those eyes that were filled with shock and confusion but also anger and humiliation, Mei only felt his blood boil. He leaned over and whispered in Chu Wanning's ear, "In a while, no matter how good it felt under me, remember to keep your voice down. His Majesty, the Emperor is right outside. If he hears that you're so unrestrained under me, I guess he won't be so happy." Mei's finger slowly slid down, lingering on every mottled kiss mark. When it went further down, Chu Wanning only felt that he was about to be pierced through by shame. His memories were chaotic and stopped at the other life when he hadn't discovered the secret of Mo Ran's curse, so he hated Mo Ran to the core. But he hated himself even more for being completely shameless. Even though he felt humiliated, disgusted, and disappointed with Mo Weiyu, whenever Mo Ran held him, whenever he heard Mo Ran's panting, when that person's sweat gathered on his abdomen and dripped onto his body, he couldn't help but feel excited and aroused. There were even times when they were in the midst of a frenzied lovemaking that he would secretly hope that Mo Ran would never stop fucking him, then he would continue to penetrate him to the core. Their storm-like entanglement gave him an illusion of peace. When he was lying in Mo Ran's arms, he would occasionally feel that all is well, that this person who kept wanting him, perhaps also loved him. But Mei was different. Although he didn't know why he fell into such a bizarre nightmare, when Mei touched him, he only felt anger and fear. He couldn't stand this kind of relationship with him. He didn't like it at all. Mei's body was different from what he remembered. It was very tall, but still smooth and fair, with soft and elegant lines, as if it was carved out of mutton fat. The scent of his body was fresh and fragrant. It wasn't the hard and vigorous body that he was used to, he was only used to Mo Ran's body. Although that person's skin was pale, the blood of a ferocious beast surged underneath and it was extremely wild. That purest male breath was like the scorching sun, burning his heart. Although sometimes it was mixed with the scent of blood, the scent of iron. It was very hard, very cold. But that sturdy chest was extremely hot. Chu Wanning suddenly opened his eyes. His bound hands couldn't stop struggling and there were traces of blood on his wrists. Because of the humiliation, 2 red lines appeared at the corners of his eyes. But his struggles were useless. The bed was soft and covered with thick animal felt and he couldn't make too much noise. Shimei watched him fight like a cornered beast with great interest. Finally, he smiled and said, "Why waste your energy, Shizun? Do you not believe that I will make you feel good?" As he spoke, he lifted Chu Wanning's slender and firm legs and wedged his waist in. His eyes were dark and he was about to enter like he had imagined countless times before. Chu Wanning suddenly closed his eyes. He bit his lips until they bled and his nails sank into his palms. All the muscles in his body were tight, not because he was afraid of the pain that would come later, but because of the shame. It was really too shameful, whether all of this was real or not. If it was fake, then he was ashamed of himself for having this kind of dream. If it was real, then he was ashamed of himself for being so stupid. He had taken in 3 disciples and 2 of them had this kind of hidden desires for him. He had always been a person who was used to reflecting on himself first. If it was Mo Ran's desire for him, then it could be said that the issue was with Mo Ran. But what about Shimei and Mo Ran added together? He couldn't help but wonder if he had done something wrong. Did he not act like a proper teacher that his disciples developed such lustful thoughts about him? What did he do wrong to deserve this kind of punishment? They were in a tense deadlock. After a long time, nothing happened. Chu Wanning slowly opened his eyes. His dark brown eyes moved, only to see that Shimei was frozen in place for some reason. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He didn't completely understand why Shimei had this kind of expression. He looked down a few inches and saw a scene that made him speechless. What thing? The heavy atmosphere from before was swept away and Chu Wanning felt as if he was struck by lightning. Cough, 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 that thing between Shimei's leg was actually gold. This situation was too absurd. Chu Wanning stiffly turned his head away, not wanting to hurt his eyes. But after a moment, he felt that something was wrong. Which normal person would have something of this color? So, he braced himself and turned his face back. With a pale face, he looked again. This time, he saw clearly that it wasn't Shimei's thing that was golden but a small dragon that appeared out of nowhere and coiled around Shimei's cock. The little dragon was coiled very tightly. It raised its head angrily. It looked at Shimei, as if it was saying that if Shimei dared to move, it would directly crush the thing it was holding into pieces. Chu Wanning. Shimei. The little dragon fiercely bared its teeth and roared at the unlucky person who was being held by it. Wah, ah yeah. If his hands weren't tied, Chu Wanning would have raised his hand to support his forehead at this moment. He really didn't want to look at it. Shimei, who has been silent for a long time, suddenly gritted his teeth and said, "What's going on?" As soon as he finished speaking, he heard the sound of the stone door opening. Taxian Jun's gloomy face appeared behind the door and his voice was full of murderous intent. Taxian Jun stepped into the door and crossed his arms. His eyes swept over the scene of the golden dragon coiling jade pillar, and his murderous intent was tinged with a bit of sarcasm. Then his thin lips opened and closed and he said coldly, "Miss, please get off the bed." Shimei was so angry that he didn't understand what he meant. He said angrily, "What, miss? Who? Oh, sorry." Taxian Jun carefully examined that thing that the dragon was holding. So, it's a young master. A young master that's simply too young. This venerable one didn't notice at all. The little golden dragon climbed on the pillar and its whiskers curled up. It bared its teeth and called out its master, "Ah yeah yeah." To humiliate a man to this extent, this was almost the limit. No matter how calm and collected Shimei was, he couldn't help but feel his veins bulged as his face turned red. However, His clothes were in a mess and he was being tied up by a strange dragon. He didn't know where it came from. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. Taxi and June walked towards him. He stood by the bedpost, crossed his arms and leaned against it. Huabinan, do you think that if this venerable one couldn't hear any noise, this venerable one wouldn't know what you're doing? He narrowed his eyes and his handsome face was full of disdain. Do you really think this venerable one is 3 years old? End chapter.